Okay, so welcome to the API Vision Working Group. This is the first meeting, the kickoff meeting. And this is Arturo. I'm the engineering manager of the ecosystem integrations team. And I'm here with a bunch of people that is also belongs to the integrations team. And the reasons for this group is that we are responsible of the API, and because it's a very, in my opinion, it's very cross-cutting concern, right? A lot of people is working and updating the API. I think that we need some time to work and resolve some of the main problems that we found with the APIs, especially the vision, how to deprecate the APIs at the long term. And that's the reason for this working group. We will discuss later, or review the topics and priorities. And we already have the handbook page and a Slack channel. And also I created this working group API label that we can use in any issue. So we can start if we need to get the attention of any issue, we can apply that label into the issues. And I'm not sure, we are a big group. I'm not sure if it makes sense to introduce everyone or just go ahead with the agenda. What do you think?
I'd say let's do the agenda, because we have also already a few topics there. Yeah.
So my idea is first. First is the frequency. My idea is to see a face-to-face every 2 weeks. This is the first time that I'm running a working group and participating in one. So any feedback is welcome. But my idea is to be working on issues or have discussion in issues during 2 weeks, and then every 2 weeks we can meet face-to-face and maybe wrap up and have other discussions that maybe we need. But my main point is to be inclusive with other people that maybe they cannot participate. And I think every 2 weeks is a good frequency to keep track of things. And maybe longer is we just forget, or we are doing things just at the very last moment. So I think the 2 weeks is fine, unless someone have to feedback on that. So if you agree with that, we can move into the next point.
I might vocalize for Luke as well. I know he left a note. He's not present this morning, but he suggested that that could be a challenge. This might not be as inclusive having the biweekly meeting. So I just wanted to raise that. I think that that's a good point, but I do see a lot of value in being able to just meet every couple of weeks, do a bit of a check-in, and make sure we do push any of the updates out into issues, into notes, making sure that's public. But I want to make sure that his comment is acknowledged. I think that's fair. Let's make sure we're making this as inclusive as possible, as async as possible. And Arturo, you've already suggested using issues as heavily as we can. So I think you're ahead of the game on that.
Cool. By the way, I'm going to be on parental leave in April. So I'm one of the facilitators, but Grant is the other one. So, anything that you need, just go after us. But otherwise, everyone can help in any other way. So even though we have our roles, it's not okay, you are the facilitator and a member, so you have to do this and I have to do this other thing. It's I don't see roles are a strong thing, but so in general, the topics that we have in the handbook page, I was writing most of the things that we should cover. So I'm going to share my screen just to have this. But the question here if there is any priorities or anything that we have to discuss first. The goals in general is we need to define the responsibilities of the API, the general vision, because sometimes it's not clear, like if it's REST first, GraphQL first, like what is the approach that we have to take. For that, we can use define user personas, consumers of the APIs. I want to review also the APIs, the general architecture, permissions, coverage, performance. Like there are a lot of things here. Testing is another big topic. Deprecations and the life cycle, standards and documentation, how we create documentation, like how can we automate the creation of the documentation, and also the learning and how to contribute into the APIs. And we can also improve, for example, creating learning paths, deep dives, and other things in order to help to the contributions. And the exit criteria, for me, the main point here is define the vision of the GitLab API for the future years. Set the foundation of cohesive development and strategy going forward. Improve the API or capture the work, because I think that maybe we are not able to resolve all the issues, but at least we can keep track what is important. So clarify the life cycle of the API, like in terms of deprecations, what we have to do in terms of REST API version 5, GraphQL, how we deprecate fields. Improve the documentation, creative learning paths and content, and define levels of performance, stability, and appropriate checks and monitoring. And with all those topics, what do you think are the more important, or what is the first thing that we have to start? One of them is, for me, that we can discuss later, like 15.0 release, because maybe we have upcoming deprecations. But apart from that, we can take this in any way. So if you see that there is one topic that is important, we have to discuss first, just speak.
Victor, you unmuted yourself faster than I did.
I would like to propose something that we can communicate outside of GitLab. I think the vision is a bit too big word here, but maybe it's related to the vision, and without that it won't work. But the idea is to have a recommendation what external parties should base their work on, whether they should focus on the API, on the REST or the GraphQL if they start some integrations. I would propose this as one of the first topics.
So you want to start the discussion with tabs versus spaces, basically. So with once and for all. I think that's a good start. I think my basic recommendation for working groups, and especially when they are starting, is to take a quick look. On one hand, is there anything long-term, something that will take longer, that the earlier you kick it off and the longer it will take, that the better it is, so that you really prioritize based on duration to some extent. And on the other hand, find really actionable things and really trim down maybe also the agenda and the focus of the working group. Otherwise, you're like turning in circles, because there will be always 100 ideas. Coming to that and making it as actionable as possible, so that everyone, we have a forum here to discuss topics. And that might be even an option to do this not bi-weekly, especially as we are starting discussion and kicking off topics. It's a little bit finding ourselves as a working group and where we are targeting. Then the next big step should be really, okay, what is actionable? What can people take over? They take as a task and come back basically on the next meeting or the next rhythm that we can add to the board, and really work towards those goals that we are setting. What they are, I have no idea right now. And I think that's really the most complex, but also to some extent the most interesting aspect at the beginning. Any comments on that? Otherwise, I will simply come up with some suggestions based on some recent actions.
One of the things that I've noticed by looking at the agenda is that there's a common theme that seems to be underlying a lot of the question, and that is GraphQL documentation to some extent. And I think by unlocking that first, there are a lot of other questions which we'll get answers to as we move along. And so, like even thinking of like the REST versus GraphQL and what to recommend, I think that by first defining better practices for GraphQL, we will see the real shape of what we have right now with GraphQL, which will unlock future decision-making as to whether or not what to recommend and how to work with. And perhaps if we get the better state of documentation and we understand really properly, it will either say, oh, the state is worse than we thought, and perhaps then the recommendation can be in a direction. And then if GraphQL is better shaped than we thought, but we just hadn't documented that, then that will probably unlock some other course. So I think by being very pragmatic and documentation first, then other things that are more opinion-based will have to be founded onto that research that we've done.
I might add to that point. I like everything you had to say, Frederic. I've had this thought that it would be helpful to kind of see from a data perspective what is most heavily used from an endpoint perspective, a field perspective, seeing from a performance perspective, like where we have the most issues that maybe we can kind of break down and prioritize from that perspective as well. Because then we could see, like, if we could see across a couple of columns, we have a feature, we have an endpoint in GraphQL, we have an endpoint in REST. Here's the performance, here's the usage. I think we can make a lot of decisions and prioritize based on that. I don't know how easy or challenging that is. I would assume more on the challenging side. But that I think also could give us a bit of the basis. And I think similar to what you're saying, Frederic, around documentation, it could lead us in a certain direction.
And that's a perfect point to start at some point, to some extent, with observability and figuring out how is it used at the moment, apart from customers telling us, but real raw data. And that was actually just a recent problem that we had in production. So we had a big customer on .com who was using the API in a way that suddenly a change that was, to some extent, it was a breaking change, but not as obvious because it was basically changing a parameter, how it was able to use it. And this was due to a security fix. So this made it even more complex, but the observability that to see who is using that, is that one customer using 90% of the bandwidth of this endpoint, and how they are using it in detail was so minimal that it was not really foreseeable what we are breaking to some extent with that change. And which is another topic of exactly that incident, is currently figuring out how to do future processes when you have such a breaking change that you need to do against the API, when you know that you will be breaking it for the customer. So, but I think observability is definitely a big topic that we have a clear understanding, so that we are not optimizing for something that only we use, for example.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good place to start. I guess the caveat too is self-managed, but definitely from a .com perspective, it's a tangible place to start.
I would have one question with respect to that. Again, I am super interested in how we can support our users who want to integrate with our APIs instead of improving performance and stability of existing APIs. So this is the standard I'm speaking about. And I don't see yet how will observability help us with coming up with a recommendation to those who want to use the APIs and want to build things around those APIs.
Well, I mean, obviously, I think that's a very large question, but one of the things that observability can do is that we can get one point that is arguable and that is performance. And so if a customer would come up with like, we have a very data intensive integration and we want it to be as fast as possible, then knowing which are the endpoints that are fast, why, and comparing both approach. For example, saying, well, if you want to use this kind of data, we have noticed a trend that REST or GraphQL, whatever, is more efficient by X amount of percentage. Like you're 15% faster. And so you can encourage your customer by the performance. I think that would be one of many other criteria. There's ease of integration, right?
Let me translate what you say to how I understand this if I don't want to speak with GitLab for this reason. That means that both GraphQL and REST are to stay. Neither is primary compared to the other. It really depends on the use case. And this is totally fair point. I'm just translating it to generic recommendation terminology, because I take part in a project where I'm the maintainer of the GitLab Terraform provider, and right now we are blocked. Actually, we are looking into, shall we integrate more with the REST API, or shall we integrate with the GraphQL API? And we don't know. And as we don't know where there is some GitLab employee as well, I think nobody knows in the world what they should pick. And this is the issue that I would like to raise here. And seriously, I'm happy with any recommendation, but I think many people are confused today. And that's why I'm arguing for that.
And I think, go ahead.
I believe you're bringing another big point here to decide, which is basically the consistency of our APIs and feature parity as well, because right now we don't have feature parity between GraphQL and REST. So this is something to decide if we are going to keep both indefinitely. If we are not, then when do we want to drop anything? And again, great point of bringing feature parity to both. Even for, not for the third party, even for our own front end, we don't have feature parity right now.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to look at the various problems we have today with regard to API, and start to tackle the bigger problems, or at least the most painful problems first. I'm not still sure like whether we will have GraphQL taking over REST, or if that ever happens. We have certain use cases that are great for REST API, certain use cases that are great for GraphQL. I'm not sure like whether we can make a decision today in this working group. But I think we can tackle a lot of interesting problems like feature parity, documentation, or cover even feature parity from the point of view of observability. Like, we might have good observability or like good enough with REST API, but not with GraphQL and things like that. So I think we could probably look at various pain points from the customer perspective, from the developer's perspective, and start addressing those first. And I think it will help, at least for me, to have a much narrower scope for this working group that we can start focusing on and think about like problem more tangible kind of problem to solve. And then we can start discussing things that are more in the long term or more kind of strategic for the long term.
Yeah, I see that this is going to be a big topic. So for me today is more like what are your thoughts in general, and what we should discuss first, and then after that we can start creating issues. I'm going to catch up with Grant about that and where we start, and then but I see that is going to be one of the first topics that we have to discuss. Because we only have 4 minutes left, I want to talk a little bit about the 15.0 release, because that is a major release. So maybe we have some things to discuss about that one, or I know that Luke already posted some comments here. Grant, I'm not sure if you want to, not sure if verbalize or make a summary about those points.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I reviewed them just briefly before the call, but yeah, so Luke, I think, had two kind of key comments here. He was pointing us to an epic that we already have around improving the GraphQL API deprecation process. And I think the crux of this is that we should be planning 2 milestones ahead of a major release before we do a deprecation. So I think, I'm just going to leave that as a note for everyone here to take a look and see if there's opportunity to comment on the issues and make sure that we're planning ahead for any deprecations for 15. I think as a kind of a counterpoint or comment to that, there's also a discussion ongoing in the thread here around there's the link is where it says here, create an ecosystem process for stewardship of GraphQL deprecation removals. Good discussion, good thoughts around, and maybe another approach is maybe we shouldn't have to force deprecations or removals of GraphQL fields where there's not as much of a burden on us to maintain it, except for maybe in cases where there's security or performance concerns. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at that, share your thoughts around that. I'm not going to make a proposal or anything here, just want to verbalize the discussion there. And that could also influence maybe how we're looking at removals for 15. If we want to, leave some of these fields around longer, we don't see security or performance issues. If we're going that direction, maybe we want to evaluate that before 15. I think there were a few maybe comments down further along, and maybe I'll verbalize the one I have, and I see one from Tim. So I had a question here. Everyone can just respond. We don't have to go into discussion today, but I'm trying to get a sense of if we do have tools to analyze usage of GraphQL fields, specifically those of the deprecated fields. I think that would also really help when it comes to looking at deprecations. If everyone's moved off, there's a preference for another field, that maybe that's something we can start to fully remove if we know there's not any usage, of course, considering maybe where self-managed comes into play there. And I see one more comment here for Tim, if you want to verbalize that.
Yeah, I think the observability is key. We have so minimal insight how it is used and what's happening and how many customers are using it. I think that would be really helpful, especially in the GraphQL area, to have the right amount of data to answer some questions at a later point. And at the meantime, also, as said, really the big topic is that I think we can't make straight away, okay, next week we are making a decision, GraphQL, REST, drop everything, delete the code, etc. That is not what we are most probably going to do here, but we can dive into strategic decisions. We can take a look at, okay, what are the possibilities along the way and figure out basically pros and cons of different approaches. And I think that is also very much goes hand in hand with observability that would help us on those parts to have a better understanding.
Okay. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone joining the working group. I think unless someone else wants to say anything, I think that was our kickoff meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create maybe a couple of issues, specifically for discuss, for example, I think the 15.0 deprecations, and probably start talking about, about REST API and GraphQL and what is the approach. And we can keep working on those issues, discussing things, and let's see how it works during these 2 weeks, and see you in 2 Mondays.
And I just want to say thanks everyone for raising some very good questions. I know we don't have answers in one day, but I think laying them all out there is the best place to start. So if you didn't get a chance to vocalize or make note of some of your concerns or priorities, go back in the doc, add those, and start participating in the issues. And yeah, really appreciate it. Hopefully Arturo and I can really be facilitators of the discussion. We just want to help steer it. But everyone here is really keeping us on the tracks and going the right direction. So the participation is key. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Arturo. Thanks, Grant, for kicking it off, especially, and getting it on the right track.
Yeah, thanks, Arturo.
Even as everyone is leaving.
All the
Take care.
hard work on the front. Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye.